Smith Blade Pro glass breaker to break some glass. Let's do this. The fire striker that's built into the Smith Blade Pro compared to a ferro rod. Yeah, why don't we just see what happens, I guess. Hello, I'm Connor. This is Ready, Set, Enjoy. I'm just out here for ripping the bush, you know, riding the old fat tire e-bike. And I wanted to come out here, well, partially because it's a beautiful day, but I also wanted to film a intro for this week's video, which is the full review of the Smith Blade Pro from Hacksmith. This is a tool that I've had in my pocket for over 2 weeks now, and I think I have a pretty full sense of what it is good at, what it's not so good at, what I like about it, what I think could be improved upon for a version 2. This is a Canadian manufactured tool. It was started on Kickstarter, raised millions of dollars, impressed a lot of people, and otherwise, you know, kind of took the EDC world by storm. Once I get back to the house, we're going to talk about all things Smith Blade Pro, 21-in-1, Canadian made, multi-tool / knife / all around awesome gadget. Let's do this. Oh, all right. Now that we're back in the office, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with some impressions about the key findings for this tool being in my pocket the last couple of weeks, and then we'll go through some of the individual tools and kind of show you how they work, if they work well, if they don't work well, and then we'll end with kind of my final thoughts, starting with the blade. You know, this is a knife after all. The M390 seems to be performing excellently and on par with some other M390 blades that I have. It came, like I said during the initial impressions video, it came like an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10 sharpness out of the box, and I haven't had to sharpen it since then. I did put it over a leather strap once just to see how much of a difference it made, and not much of a difference. It can still cut paper, no problem, and I've been pretty happy with that aspect of it. On the topic of the blade, I really like how when you do flip it, the flipper tab becomes a bit of a guard, so that when you are choked up on the knife, it gives you something for your fingers to lock in against. A couple of things that, you know, might seem like they're table stakes but are implemented really well on this knife is the deep carry clip. This is one of the better clips that I've used. It rides really deep in the pocket, and it has pretty much the perfect amount of tension. One thing that I think is underrated, or, you know, not super appreciated, is this tritium glow indicator, especially when I brought this knife camping, and we'll talk about that later. Having that little glowing strip make it easy to find when it's in a bag. I had it on my in my bushcraft kit, and that was really great. Even just on my nightstand, the baby wakes up, I'm getting dressed in the dark, being able to see that on my nightstand was surprisingly a feature that I came to really appreciate. One of my favorite parts is the 90-degree bit driver. So yes, you can, you know, have the bit in the end like this to drive the screw normally, but you can also have it in like this. We've been baby proofing lately, and I've been having to, you know, secure bookshelves and cabinets and stuff to the wall, and making sure that I get a really nice beyond finger tight, beyond even, you know, screwdriver tight on those things gives me a lot of peace of mind. Another piece that I really did appreciate having on this knife was the pry tool. So I think I talked about in my initial impressions video, I can't really justify carrying a dedicated EDC pry bar around with me. So having a pry bar, integrated into my knife was something that I really did appreciate. I used it to scrape birch bark off a tree for fire starting. I used it to open up some containers that were annoyingly stuck, like containers of grout, for doing tiling. It did work really well for that. I'll show it off later in the video. I don't think I could get through this video without mentioning the fidget factor of this tool. It is insanely addicting. I found myself taking this out of my pocket during like Zoom meetings when I obviously wasn't on camera, wasn't the one presenting, and just absently flipping this over and over and over again for like an hour straight while I was watching a presentation. It is so satisfying. But the other fidget that I kind of started doing was just these bits, just kind of popping them off their magnet and then sliding them back into their magnet. I'm not generally a fidget person, but this turned me into a fidget person, and you know what? I'm not complaining about it. Now moving on to some observations that aren't necessarily in the what I loved category. I'll start with one-handed use. So obviously for the knife, one-handed, no problem. Where the one-handedness can be problematic is when you're using the bit driver. So I'll show you. I'll try to get this Phillips head out of here with one hand and get it into the bit driver slot. Okay. So like, yes, you can do it, but it's not elegant. It's not easy. So comparing that to like my Leatherman Free P2, for example, you can get any of those tools out and activated with one hand, no problem. One-handed use for this is not going to be its specialty. Now, when you are taking this out of your pocket, there is two things to be aware of. One is that when your hand is coming into your pocket to pull this tool out, occasionally, at least in my experience, my thumb would rub against these top two bits as I was sliding my hand into my pocket to pull out the tool, and occasionally it would push the bit out. It has happened to me, maybe 4 or 5 times over the last couple of weeks. Some people in the chat thought that it was to do with the bits rubbing against the fabric inside your pocket. That to me is not what's happened. Just movement of the tool inside the pocket never caused these bits to get dislodged. It was my finger. Now luckily, the bit just falls into your pocket, right? It's not really a worry that it's going to fall on the ground, just by the nature of that motion. So I wasn't too worried about that. Overall, I don't think it's an inherent flaw in the tool. And James's point was that if you reach into your pocket and grab it this way, rather than grab it this way, then that'll never happen, and it's true. But my observation with that is if you do go, I'm going to try to illustrate this, if you do go into your pocket and grab it like this, your thumb lands on the glass breaker, and it is pretty sharp, so it's less comfortable, and so I have just been defaulting to grab it the way that I instinctually wanted to grab it. I think the utility of having those bits in the scales greatly outweighs the slight oddity of how you need to grab it out of your pocket, and I don't think it's a major problem, just something to be aware of. Another thing that kind of falls under, I think, the break-in / just getting used to this tool is because of the detents in the blade opening that gives you the protractor. You really need to commit to opening this blade. If you don't really intentionally give it a good flick, what can happen is that it'll end up like this. That has happened to me regularly, and it's happened less since it's gotten a little bit broken in and the ball bearing has been interacting with those those detents quite a lot, but still maybe 1 in 10 times I go to open this knife, I don't put quite enough gumption into the flipping, and I can obviously do it intentionally, but sometimes it'll just stop here. Now, if you do put, a nice, good, forceful flick into it, it'll open, almost every time. But you do need to just be intentional about it. You can't half-ass it, otherwise it will just stop halfway through. Now, the only two things that I would consider downsides to this design are the fire striker and the blade sharpening. So let's talk about the blade sharpening first, because I think this is a fairly straightforward thing and there's a fairly easy workaround. So due to the nature of the pry bar, you'll see that it does stick out onto the blade by about 1/2 inch. And because of that fact, the last 1/4 inch or so of the blade is covered by that pry bar. Now, even though, I'm going to try to get a good picture of this, even though there is a tiny little sharpening choil right in there at the base of the blade, that pry bar does get in the way a little bit. This is a strop, but like, you see what I mean, where the sharpening stone or your ceramic rod or your strop can't actually easily get all the way down to the bottom part of that knife. But there's also a workaround. If you just put the knife at, not quite a 90 degree, then it's out of the way of the pry bar and you can get the entirety of the blade. So bit of an oddity, a bit of a quirk of this design. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You can't really use that part of the knife anyways, so it's not going to get dull. Therefore, do you really need to sharpen it? I don't think it's going to be a problem day to day, because you've still got a nice, amount of blade to work with, even without that little 1/4 inch. But it's just something to be aware of. Now, on the topic of the fire striker, this is something that I've had consistent trouble with. So I did take this to a winter survival course, and you can watch that video if you're interested, but I was not actually able to start a fire with this. Now, part of the problem is that the striking surface is recessed, so there is, a little bit of a lip around it, and so I wasn't able to very easily get something in there to strike it. Now, after I posted my initial video about this, I got a whole bunch of comments saying, use the tweezers, James used the tweezers. The tweezers were used to strike it in the Kickstarter video. And I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. So I grabbed the tweezers out of the Smith blade, and let's see if I can get a spark. I think I get a spark fast. Oh, there you go. There you go. So, like, yes, you can get a spark off of this, but when you are out in the woods making a fire, you usually hit the ferro rod multiple times in order to start a fire, because the first spark, it could catch your tinder and start the fire, but usually you do 5 or 6 good strikes in order to light your tinder. So I will show you when I go do the demonstration. I will compare it to my ferro rod that I actually used to start a fire in that same scenario, and the difference between the two. So now that we've gotten through my impressions of the tool, let's head into the other room and give some demos of how they all work. Welcome to my testing table. So we're going to take a look at the various tools that are listed on the box of the Smith Blade Pro and give a little demonstration. The first thing on the list is grade 5 titanium handles. Yeah, okay, you know what that is already. The next is the M390 blade, the 15-degree protractor, and the nail file. So let's take a look at that. The M390 blade. Like I said, I've been using this for a couple of weeks now. And let's see if it's still sharp. We'll start with some fairly thick, white printer paper, and then we'll try some thinner, notebook paper. So let's start here. Caught near the end there. Yeah, I mean, it catches a little bit, but it is still cutting. Yeah, and it's, it is able to get a cut, but it's not obviously as sharp as it was on day one. Let's try some thinner notebook paper. Does okay. Yeah, few catches, but it's not horrible. I would, yeah, see that caught that time. I would give this, oh, that was a really good cut. I mean, after almost 3 weeks of usage, I would give this an 8 out of 10. Now for the 15-degree protractor, I mean, the way that I'm gonna use that is for basically marking like a speed square. So let's set this thing to 90 degrees and use it like a speed square. There you go. We could do a 45. Is that a 45? Maybe that's a 45. Can you mark lumber with the protractor? Can you use it as a speed square? I would say yes in a pinch. If I'm doing a ton of this, I'm going to use my actual speed square because, it doesn't have a ton of lip here. And so making sure that it's well situated, especially on dimensional lumber, like this is a piece of pressure treated wood and the edge is kind of curved. It's not great, but if you look at the cut side where it's, been cut with a saw, that actually does latch on a little bit more nicely so you can make your marks. And then the nail file, I mean, yeah, not a big utility piece for me. I would actually use it while the knife is closed rather than like they showed off in the Kickstarter, oh, you can file your nails with the back of a blade and look like a supervillain, whatever. Like, yeah, okay, but I'm not going to flip the knife out just for that. I will probably just keep it in here and do this. But again, I'm not doing that all that often, so sure. Next on the box is the metric ruler, imperial ruler, and tweezers. So the imperial ruler is on this side and is marked by ticks in inches. And then on the metric side, you have your millimeters marked here. And then on the blade, the ticks extend onto the blade only on the metric side. Let's say I want to mark 4 inches. Yeah, I don't know about this. Say 1, 2, 3, 4 inches. Sure, there's your 4 inches, and then you can use your protractor to make your mark. Yeah, sure, it works. Am I ever going to use that instead of a tape measure? No. In terms of the tweezers, I haven't had a real need to use these in the time that I've been testing the tool, but I think they would be good for picking a splinter. They are very fine. There's nothing great nor bad to say about these tweezers. They are tweezers. Next up in the list is wire strippers. So this is, a gauge of wire that this should theoretically be able to handle. You put it into the divot right there, and then you bring the blade down and you use the blade to cut through the wire insulation. And you twist it a couple of times, and then you can strip a wire. Heck yeah, that works. You have to be obviously a little careful. It's just like when you're stripping a wire with some wire cutters. Here, let's see if I can actually get through the wire itself. Presumably I should be able to. So I mean, it kind of dug in there, but Oh, now it's kind of stuck. Oh, there we go. Okay, so yes, it was able to cut through this wire. A little awkward, but now I can put it in like this, twist it around a little bit, cut through that insulation. There we go. The wire hath been stripped. Next on the list is the reversible belt clip. I'm not going to show that to you. You know how a belt clip works. And I already said how much I like the deep carry clip. And then next set is the different bits. So Phillips, flathead. I'm not going to show you each one individually, but I will show you driving a screw. I've got a teeny tiny little wood screw here. So let's drive this sucker. One thing I will say is that the pry bar can kind of dig into your palm when you're putting that first amount of pressure on, but you know, that's, I don't think you're going to be usually using this to drive wood screws into wood, but I'll also show you the 90 degree driver as well. So use this to do the final tightening, and sorry, it slipped a little bit. You can really use this to crank down hard on your wood screw and get it driven. Next up, we have the sim tool, the sewing awl, and the black pen. Now, almost immediately after getting the Smith blade, I swapped out what came in it. So I've been carrying the flathead, I've been carrying the Phillips #1, the black pen, and the Robertson #1 in my actual device that I've been carrying, but it does come with a bunch of other stuff as well. There you go. The sim tool. The sim tool and the sewing awl are the same, implement. So I do have an old dishcloth here where, say you wanted to repair something. I don't know. Let's get that sewing awl. Boom. There you go. There, and then there's a hole in the side if you want to put some thread in there. In terms of the black pen, I have kept it on my own Smith blade. Haven't really found an occasion to use it because all of my work is done on computers, but it is a pen. It does write. I think I would personally hold it with the belt clip on my thumb. It's obviously a little bit awkward. There you go. There is a pen, and it works. Now we move on to the pry bar / bottle opener / staple puller. I do not have a bottle, honestly, to test the bottle opener with, but I do have a hammer and a roofing nail. So yeah, why don't we just see what happens, I guess. I mean, yeah, I got it started at least. Let's see if I can use something else as leverage to get this out of here. I'll be ironic and use the the head of a hammer to use to pry out this nail, but there you go. You can pry out a roofing nail out of a pressure treated piece of wood with the Smith blade, even if it involves using a hammer. I also don't have some staples readily available, but you can imagine that it works similarly to the pry bar. As for glow in the dark, sure, let's take a look. If I cut my hands over the tritium, you can see it glowing. It's more evident in an actual dark room, and I showed it in my initial video, so take a look at that. The fire striker, we have already been over that. I will show a comparison at the end of the video to a ferrocerium rod and a fixed blade knife, just so you can get the difference. Now this pointy guy on the end here, they call it a tungsten metal scribe / emergency glass breaker. Let's start with the scribe of it all, and then we'll do the glass breaking demonstration as a scribe, I can use it to make some marks in the wood. You know, I'm not going to use it to replace my pencil if I had a choice, but and I'm also not a metal worker, so I don't really have a perspective from that side, but it can make marks. Time to test the glass breaker. Now, I don't have a car window to test with, but I do have an old picture frame that fell off a shelf and broke, and it is, you know, obviously not very thick glass, but it is glass. So let's try it out. I'm going to be wearing safety glasses, and I'll be wearing gloves just so I don't get safety comments. Let's do this. First hit, nothing. Second hit, there you go. The blade did come out though. So, you know, can it break glass? Yes. Would I be able to break glass without this thing on the corner? Well, why don't we test that too? I'll just flip it over. Use the other side that doesn't have the glass breaker on it. Also, can technically break glass. So, take that for what it is, I guess. And then the last thing on the box, because we've already looked at the extended ruler and the 90-degree bit driver, the last thing to look at is the bubble level. And to be honest with you, I don't know how much of a demonstration you really need of a bubble level, but there you have it, folks. You can determine the levelness of an item using the Smith Blade Pro. All right, so now that we've gotten our hands dirty, let's talk comparisons. So the Smith Blade Pro, it's not a knife, and it's not like any traditional multi-tool or like many traditional multi-tools that you see on the market. So my obvious comparison is with Leatherman. So this is my Free P2, which is of course a pliers based multi-tool. And the biggest win for the Smith Blade is its compactness and its weight. When you compare these two tools, especially in your pocket, the Smith Blade is narrower, it's thinner, and it is substantially lighter. And so I am probably going to be more likely to throw this in the pocket for day-to-day use when I know that I don't have any serious projects going on. Now, if I do have serious projects going on, one of two things is going to happen. Either I will throw this in the pocket because of the pliers alone and the fact that the Leatherman can do the majority of what the Smith Blade can do, minus, of course, the bubble level and the fire striker, but And so that would get me through, you know, a day of doing house renovations. The other thing that I might do, and we're going to do a video on this in a couple of weeks, is probably put some kind of pouch on my belt that contains some dedicated tools, like some pliers, like some utility blades, like some dedicated screwdrivers, etc. So for day-to-day use compared to a Leatherman, I am probably going to pick the Smith Blade unless I know I'm going to be going around the house and doing some dedicated, you know, house maintenance or renovation tasks that I have kind of pre-set out for myself for a given day. There are, of course, some knife-based multi-tools out there. I know Leatherman has some, I know Gerber has some. And to be honest with you, just looking at their feature sets online, I think the Smith Blade is a really great option, even compared to those options. You know, the Leatherman, I think it's the K2, is their knife-based multi-tool, and it has a bit driver and a couple of other things, but it doesn't come close to the Smith Blade. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that it is heavier than the Smith Blade. One of the best things about this tool is how much it disappears in your pocket, how small it is, how great that clip feels, and how much it just gets out of the way when you're not using it. But when you do go to use it, the deployment is instantaneous and usually very easy. The variety of tools on here means that I won't feel strange not having my multi-tool on me if I'm going about my day, because usually I like to have a multi-tool nearby if I'm just carrying a pocket knife. And then, you know, if I had to choose between the Smith blade and carrying just a folding pocket knife like this mini bug out from Benchmade, I will choose the pocket knife alone in the scenario where it's summer, I'm wearing really light shorts, like maybe gym shorts or workout pants. I will pick this if I'm also carrying a sling bag that contains my Leatherman, because then I have all my bases covered and I have the smaller, more lightweight, because yes, the mini bug out does weigh less than the Smith blade, and it has, you know, this is by far my most used EDC tool of all time. I carry this every single day for like 5 years. For the shoulder seasons, for when I'm wearing, you know, more substantial pants and I want to be fairly sure that I'm going to have what I need on me for a regular day where I'm not doing renovations. And I know that sounds really specific, but that is the vast majority of days, right? 3/4 of the year here in Canada is not summer and I'm not wearing shorts. And, you know, more than half of those days, I'm probably not doing major renovations around the house. I think this fits that case. So call it 60% of the year. I think this is going to be a really good option. So I am going to continue carrying it. I am going to have it in my regular rotation. Honestly, the 3 things that I think will be in my pocket most often will be the Smith Blade Pro, my mini bug out, and my Big Idea Design lookout for the days that I want to carry an EDC fixed blade, which honestly these days is a lot, because the convenience of just pulling that out of its sheath and not having to do any kind of opening and closing action is pretty convenient when you only need a knife. But if you need more than a knife, you either have to carry knife plus multi-tool, or you could carry the Smith blade and kind of get a really good hybrid of both worlds. So, you know, my final thoughts is I'm extremely impressed by this tool. It is something that I will be adding to my regular rotation. In fact, it's been in my pocket for almost 3 weeks and I don't see it coming out of my pocket anytime soon until the weather gets really warm, but it's currently February in Canada, so that's not going to be for a little while still. And even then, I will probably still choose to carry this on occasion when I'm not wearing gym shorts. So that is all for the Smith Blade Pro review from Hacksmith. This wonderful Canadian manufactured blade is still in the throes of Kickstarter backer order fulfillment, and so it's going to be a couple of months before this is available for sale. I have no idea when that's actually going to be. I'm not affiliated with Hacksmith. I don't have any inside knowledge other than what they put in their Discord channel. But I would say when they do become available for sale, if you're not a Kickstarter backer already, seriously consider picking one of these up, because it is unique. It is, you know, really nicely balanced between the traditional pliers-based multi-tool and your everyday folding knife. And to me, honestly, when I take it out of my pocket to use it, I do get a little tinge of Canadian pride. And the fact that there is a little maple leaf inscribed there under where the tweezers go makes me a little bit happy, because things being manufactured in Canada is pretty rare. And there's no shade to, you know, things being manufactured in other places. I've got American made, I've got overseas made, I've got a bunch of different things, you know, on my person at various times. But the little twinge of Canadian pride that I get when I'm using this particular tool can't be ignored. So that's it for the full review of the Smith Blade Pro. Thank you very much for watching, and if you haven't already, please do hit that button. You know which button I'm talking about. I am trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to post every single week, and it is something that I truly love. We will be going through some alternate EDC stuff in the next couple of weeks. We will be going through some camping and trailer stuff very soon. We're prepping for a really big trip in April, and there's a lot of work to be done on our 1970s retro mod trailer. So that's going to be coming soon. I've got some videos about maintenance upcoming on EDC tools and gear, and I'm really looking forward to what we have coming. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Smith blade. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to demonstrate that I didn't already using the Smith blade. Let me know if there's any comparisons you'd like me to make to other tools, and also let me know if there are any topics around readiness, preparedness, or gears and tool that you would like to see from this channel in the future. Otherwise, stay ready, get set, and go enjoy your life. Bye. Welcome to the garage. We're going to do just a quick comparison of the fire striker that's built into the Smith Blade Pro compared to a ferro rod. So let's get a spark off of this. There you go, a couple of sparks using the tweezers. And then we'll compare that to this Exotac fire rod, which is a small ferrocerium rod, and I'll just use my LT5 to strike it. I think you can see the difference we're talking about here. Now, obviously, a fire striker built into a multi-tool is never going to reach that same level, but the sparks that get thrown off of here are able to start a fire pretty easily, but I was not able to actually start a fire with the striker on here. So this is more for educational, comparison purposes. Thanks for watching.